Thank you for
Okay.
thank you for that introduction, Susie. Greatly appreciated. I hope everybody's well, and thank you for attending. So, as Susie says, my art practice, I explore contemporary racial politics, migration, religion, and blackness, and in relation to blackness, whiteness. And again, as Susie said, kind of I use sculpture, photography, did an BA in photography at Nottingham Trent University, and then just graduated now sculpture from RCA. Latterly just explored quite a lot of digital and animation work and a bit of film as well. So what I thought I'd do for this presentation is, rather than a PowerPoint, is go through work which is actually shouldn't have done that. I just got it to come. Share what's on my website, and then talk through the work. So the first body of work I'm going to talk about is this 12 Stations of the Masquerade. And the work I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk pretty much what I've produced over the last 3-4 years. And with my practice, a lot of it is intertwined, different bodies of work I would return to, go back, move forward with, and then let sit for a while. And then each time it actually feeds probably the next body of work as well. And I do work on about 3 or 4 different bodies of work at the same time. So this work, 12 Stations of Masquerade, I'm kind of bouncing off previous work, which was titled The Masquerade, which I've purchased and collected a lot of figurines and carvings and object d'art and loads of ceramic things, and kind of brought them all together to part as a conversation around kind of the relationship between Africa and Europe historically, and some part of it part post-colonial conversation. But this work has moved on from that. This work kind of predominantly looks at kind of the migration and kind of the conversation around protecting the borders in Europe. And actually, a lot of this stuff for this work I do actually purchase in Europe, mainland Europe. So the African carvings there, the figurines I purchased from Europe, and you see as we go through the work, there's kind of counterfeit handbags. And you can see this work is kind of, this was the first work I introduced the razor wire. And that's the conversation around kind of protection of borders, and kind of talking about Europe and protecting borders, obviously America protecting borders. But it's quite interesting when I heard something like Hungary kind of putting razor wire up to protect their borders. And for me, that I thought was quite interesting. So I brought that into the work. You can see the work has halos as well. So I'm interested, again, the impact of religion, part historically, but equally how that has fed through to contemporary life and impacts on contemporary life, particularly again in Africa, in terms of Africa being kind of one, I think Nigeria as a nation is one of the largest church building nations there is at this moment in time. A couple of things I want you to note in this image is one, the kind of this counterfeit, the brand is actually Moschino counterfeit handbag, and then the wigs. And so this was the first work I started introducing the wigs into the work. And there's many dialogues, and we'll have that through this presentation, one about kind of counterfeit handbags and this European aesthetics, or what is being aspired to as a European aesthetic with the wigs and long hair. Initially with the expanding foam, I introduced that to the work to fill out the handbags to kind of make them puff out. But then I'd seen a colleague of mine working with expanding foam, in a complete different way, but that did give me an insight where it can be used as a kind of a wider material for making art. And it helped in a sense of making sure that the work it's on these plinths, but making sure the plinths are part of the work. And there's kind of there's a lot of narratives we can expand on the expanding frame as well. This image here, this body of work, like I say, is 12 Stations of the Masquerade. So the intention is to have 12 of those figures and figurines on the plinths, surrounded, and this will be in the center, and then the 12 figurines will be surrounding this figure. And this work's still in progress. There's only 7 completed at this moment in time on the plinths. I intend to go back to Europe, buy them in Brussels and Italy, the figures and the handbags. So the intention, when resources are in place, to make further purchases. Again, one of the things to note about the handbags, and just that I noted, so when I purchase handbags, the quality is varying, but some of them are very good quality, as to a point where I think some people would be struggling to know whether it's a legit brand or not. And these Machino ones was particularly really good quality and not particularly expensive. And I think that feeds into a conversation we will have later about kind of fakeness and even passing fakeness on. Use quite a lot of gold in my work. I'm intrigued about kind of gold visually, and then it's got all its metaphors, but then as a material, and then its impact historically, how as human beings we have been drawn to this shiny metal and put great value on it. I personally struggle with that, but I can see how as human beings and kind of mines in Brazil and South Africa, where we put so much value on this shiny metal. Yeah. Well, and equally, I'd say kind of when I go to Europe and look in the churches, obviously go to Italy a lot and look in the churches, and then there's kind of gold figurines and Christ figures all over. And just to highlight, so I am again showing this from my website, so it's michaelforbes.org.uk. So obviously you can at any moment go back and have a look at this work yourselves. So yeah, I started introducing the baseball caps, the wigs, and the baseball caps, and then there's watches as well. You'll see as we go through this kind of gold watches. And I'm just interested about this kind of back to the gold, the fake bling with the baseball caps, a fake bling with the watches as well. Here's another shot of, this is in my living space, so it's just testing it out. So like I say, there's 4, you've seen 3 at the start of that. So that's the 12 Station Masquerade work. Like I say, it's ongoing. I will be continued developing it. So the next body of work I shall go to is the auto portrait after Rembrandt, a black man in a wig and a baseball cap. And obviously, in terms of, as a title suggests, kind of influence of, say, Rembrandt. And it's not necessarily Rembrandt's influenced my work, but I do appreciate looking at Rembrandt. So if I go to a museum, if I know that Rembrandt's in any of the museums, I will go and search his work out. But in particular, his portraits, I was quite fascinated, or his self-portraits, is that he did perform. So he did dress up, hence like this, but then he performed for his paintings. And I've kind of done the similar thing. I've dressed up and performing for the camera. So the materials, obviously, I bought these materials for the sculpture work, and then decided they were sitting around for a couple of weeks. But so I decided to get a bit playful, shall we say, and use the work and use the material and start taking self portraits. I said to obviously I had a mirror behind the camera, and I was very conscious of letting my stubble grow for about a week or so. So it plays with this kind of part notions of a mask. And I think once we've got masks on, and I didn't realize until I actually started doing that, is that you can start performing for the camera and taking on a role. So the previous work, 12 Stations Masquerade, the previous work to that was the Masquerade. So now I do get a sense this conversation around masquerading and putting a mask on. And so they have the masquerades in Venice, and they have the masquerades in African countries. So I can see where putting a mask on, then you can start performing for a audience. And entitling this the kind of black man in the wig. So again, I'm very conscious of the term black man in terms of what society projects on a black man. So this image in many ways stops being about me, because it ends up being a photographic image, what goes out there, and then what is projected on this image, and like I say, as me as a black man. I was very conscious not to, okay, there's elements of performing the hands and heads, but not given a smile or kind of, so I was very conscious of keeping a very deadpan image to my facial features. And like I say, I studied photography, so I'm very conscious of the power of the photographic image, and clearly making a good quality photographic image. And this work, even though I don't have necessarily the wigs and caps around, but it's like all work, I will see it as a kind of ongoing body of work, and I will probably come back to it at some point. And I kind of, again, this bling of baseball caps, I like the over the topness of these baseball caps. I wear baseball caps generally, but I wear a plain black one. So these are clearly over the top for me as an individual. But again, there's a whole narrative around that. There's a whole narrative around hair. There's a whole narrative around wigs, weaves, and then clearly there's a narrative around baseball caps and messages as well. The next body of work I'm going to present is Gold cries for, here we go, gold cries for gold people, black cries for black people. This work came off the back of completing my dissertation. So I did, for everybody, I don't know, mentioned it at the start, but obviously I've just graduated from I did mention it at the start, obviously, from sculpture RCA. So part of the MA there, it's a 2-year, so you do the dissertation in the first year. And I was very conscious of choosing dissertation subject, what would feed my practice. And so I chose to do metaphysics. Well, the full title of the work is The Metaphysics of Blackness and Racial Politics through the work of Kerry James Marshall. And what was influential from obviously all the reading material and doing the research was a book what was influential to Kerry James Marshall and influential to this work. And it's Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. So he talks about black visibility or invisibility as well. And Kerry James Marshall, in response to that, he did a painting, a portrait as well. It's called the Portrait of an Artist as His Former Self. So he played with kind of tones of blackness. So with that, then this is my response to Kerry James Marshall's work and the invisibility and visibility. And how I presented that is the frame is painted in a black matte paint, and the Christ figure is painted in a gloss paint. So then I just wanted to play with those slight variations of blackness. The wigs, again, introduced to this work. So in terms of the dissertation, I obviously did extensive research on racial politics and blackness. But as I kind of migrated through my dissertation, then there's a whole conversation of whiteness and then in religion's impact on kind of racial politics, but more from the perspective of black and white and how kind of religion took on the role of kind of making black a sin. So I introduced the wig to deny whiteness and then to deny the face of Christ. I do find religion problematic, and again, as I mentioned, one for its historical influence on the world, Latin America, and just Europeans' impact on the rest of the world. I think religion went out and was touted to soften up populations who then came obviously exploited by the Europeans later. This work, again, it's ongoing. I developed this during the summer break of 2019, and I still intend to develop it further as we go through. Detail there. So here you see the watch is introduced to the work, and this is a comment on kind of newfound wealth and kind of the buying into the shiny, buying into the bling, and this again the display of bling, and displaying kind of a false wealth in some ways. Again, I mentioned that in the previous work. As you go through the website, you can see where I'm not going to go through this whole process, but I have put some images up there what show the process as a whole. And I found the process as an artist, the process for me is very important, and going through the process and enjoying the process. The finished product, you end up with, the finished product is pretty much the finished product. The process is what I find really fascinating. So there is a number of images up there, which I shall let you go through again if you want to visit the website. A couple of points. So again, this Christ figure has been adapted and changed. The flaying on the side, that's been cut away and repainted. So I'm just going to skim through these. Two things I'll show you. That's part of the process, and Susie, I know this well in terms of the mold making workshop at RCA. And this is making the molds for the Christ figure. And then I'm coming right to the end. Sorry, it's jumped out. Let's go right to the end. Show those couple of images there, the kind of silicon molds within the Jesmonite jacket. But it is the end I'm coming to. So here we are. So I want to just, this is where that work started off from. And historically, I've not necessarily sketched a lot of work, but I did want to sketch this out, and I have been sketching a lot more work since this. But this is the starting point for that work. And one I want you to remember is this, because how it influenced previous work. So obviously, as MA, you have tutorials, and Kate is actually on this Zoom link. So I had a tutorial with Kate Davis in the first year, and she put a question to me about why the black body. And for me, I thought it was very obvious why the black body. Being a black male, I thought that was enough for why I would want to make work exploring the black body. But it got left hanging there, and it wasn't really enough for Kate, but at that moment in time, I couldn't answer it. So I'm going to leave that and so you remember here, and then we'll look back at it later. A couple of other images from this process I do want to show you. So this is the CNC room at RCA, and then you go through a process of making a model. So this grey figure, this is at foam, and then this CNC Cougar machine is programmed from a 3D file. And that 3D file actually was produced from, I've got crucifix figures in my bathroom, so I did actually take one in, got it scanned, and then once you've got a 3D file, high-res file, it can be blown up whatever size. So the actual Christ figure I've got is about 30 centimeters high, but this whole Christ figure, when it's complete, it's 1.5, 1.2 meters high. A couple of other points just to note: the block at the bottom there, initially that was there just for the CNC process, so it actually gets screwed to the wooden frame here at the bottom. But once I got these back with the blocks on, obviously the intention was to cut across it and then join the two figures up. But I did find it really, obviously sculpturally, found it interesting with the blocks, so I made the decision to keep the blocks. Again, you see another one of the, and again, this process is really fascinating, just in terms of watching the machine in action, where it kind of literally mills it out, and then all I'm left to do when I get it back at the end, I have to sand it down to smooth it down. And this is the model, again, the model material, just playing around with it in the studio before I go into the actual mold making process. So I'm going to jump out of this now. What I'm going to show you now, there's going to be a short video so you can actually I'm going to come back to these images later, but we're shooting right down to the bottom, and I escape that, play the video. So what it is, you can see me obviously in the mold maker. It's only a quick video, it's only 6 minutes. So you see me opening one of the Christ figures. There's a bit of music too as well, so you may have to turn your volume down. Right, we shall open another Jesus. Gotta have a laugh, haven't you? She'll be back. So we go back to, yeah, so just seeing, so we are going back to RCA Art Studio full page. So again, I will come back to these images in a minute. So this is the image of the sculpture work, the black body, I told you about previously, and Kate put the question to me, why the black body? So that lingered with me for quite a while. And then during the summer break between first year and second year, I thought about that quite a bit. So this piece of work, okay, you see it on screen, but it's to be reproduced between 1.5 meters to 1.7 meters wide and high. And it's made from a mind mapping software. And so I'm dyslexic, so I've been given that as part of, to help me study. But the intention really is obviously to develop your thoughts and blue sky thinking and make a mind map. But when I was actually shown how to use it, I found it really fascinating and thought at some point I would be able to make some artwork from it. And so it just by coincidence actually tied in terms of putting this together. I put in the center, you've got the black body, and then obviously all the branches off with all the thoughts, my thoughts, what's projected on the black body. You kind of see it, reading material, writings, TV, cinema, all these thoughts, I put them down and then used it. These connections, obviously, I'm using, extending these connections to create the curves. Obviously, for me, I'm thinking about creating something what's going to be visually interesting. Here's a detail, so it kind of helps you to see it in detail. So here again, we've got the black body at the center, and then we have, I'll put my glasses on. I'll read a few, but then again, it's up to you, you can go back to later. So we've got, they say the black body in there, we can scroll down this branch, the black male body, stereotypes, negative images, sexually irresponsible, Black Lives Matter, strength, manual labor, emotional pain, addiction, self-harm. Let's go up. So that's one branch. Then we've got obviously contemporary music. We've got contemporary media, music, a range of music options or forms. We've got over this side, we've got, again, branch coming down from black body. We've got whiteness, we've got white supremacy, white fragility, white privilege. A lot of talk about that at this moment in time. Fear of the black physicality, national discourse, white power, and again, it's kind of expanded. So my point in showing you this detail is clearly from this. Obviously, you can't see the detail, but it expands. So that's it. So it's ultimately finished as a photographic image, stroke light box image. And actually today it is actually launched on White Cube Gallery website. So I've got this work and some other work on their website. So it is actually, if one wanted to purchase, it's actually up for sale on White Cube's website. So if you do want to rush there, feel free. So we go to the next body of work. So I'm coming back up onto this page. So this is my studio RCA. This is pretty much, it's not completely how I left it, but it's not far off. So this is the working space. This is how I develop work. You can see obviously the mind map there behind. That's just printed out on a relatively cheap paper. The posters as well, they'd be printed on a larger scale, again printed out just on cheap A3 paper. But what I'm showing you here in terms of this work was, I was building these figurines, sculptures as individual pieces. Ultimately, I thought I'd get to a point of 10. Not quite sure completely how I was going to be working with it. But as I was progressing, I always photographed, documented the work, and which was very useful for me when I was away from the studio to see the photographs, and by seeing the photographs away from the studio, I can obviously think about it, look at it in context to how the work relates to each other. And then I could see my work was evolving more from individual sculptures to installations forms. And I tried this, and this has, I think there's a range of variations with this work potentially. I think this is pretty much how the studio was left when I returned to Nottingham in the 11th of March. And again, it's kind of sometimes, obviously, you start out work with you've got a sense of where you want to be with the work. Obviously, there's conversations around the studio, there's tutorials, and you may be going in one direction. You can pull back. Does it work? Does it not work? And then it got to just testing the bust on its own on the plinth, and that for me worked very well. Well, the test with the bust with the plinth, the wig, and the arms. Again, the black body mind map as a backdrop works one photographically, but does work in terms of even in the gallery space, placing it up to quite close to the work. So then there's a direct conversation between the mind map and the sculptural work. Again, these are all made out of Jesmonite, these Christ figures, and that was the first time I used it. I found it really great material, really like it, and will be obviously using it quite a bit in the future. It's obviously more solid than just a normal white moulding plaster, and obviously not as hard as, say, a concrete, but it is a really nice material to work with. Showing you these variation of images again, like I say, this is me testing it out, what works as an installation, what doesn't work. Just get through the mind map and we go to these posters. So I've developed these 3 posters ultimately I've developed here, but again, it's an ongoing body of work. This actual poster will probably be presented with the 12 stations of the masquerade. I think I initially got the poster, seen the poster of kind of protection, danger, razor wire, but literally working with the sculptural work, I did actually cut myself and have to have 3 stitches. So, and the nature of obviously razor wire, it is put there for you to cut flesh and to protect the borders. And I do find it is quite a nasty material to work, but visually is quite interesting as well. This image, again, I found it interesting. You can see it around obviously pylons or electrical installations, and the figure, every time I've seen it, it is a black figure. So that I was drawn to that and using it, and that will be used as an installation. Will be part of an installation. I'll show you later as we go into the VR space. It does work very well with the suspended figures. Size in it to be reproduced about 0.8 of a meter, so just under a meter high. This one, again, seen a poster and then adapted it to kind of fit for what I want in terms of obviously colours, but then the text as well. This area is monitored by CCT for the prevention of crime. And for me, it's a question of who's committing the crime, and then the acts of possible violence, then that's my addition to the work. And as we can all see, obviously, over recent weeks, post Floyd George's death, in terms of how the use of the camera, the video camera, is really very important in terms of monitoring acts of crime. So again, who is committing the crime? Is it the state or perpetrators on behalf of the state? So we go to now. Let's go down. And go back to So this body of work is ongoing body of work. Been developing this for the last 3 years. Shop selling the ontology of whiteness. So when I was purchasing the counterfeit handbags in Venice, Naples and Rome, so I started documenting the shop windows. Or no, before that, I started doing research on handbags. It didn't really mean anything to me because I have no particular interest in. So one thing I was interested about, that conversation around the counterfeit and why do people want to buy a counterfeit. So then I did actually start research into obviously the branded handbags. And then, so if you go to my Pinterest, if you're interested, then I've got a whole collection of branded handbags there. But equally looking at that, I started looking at shop windows, found all those fascinated. So I started photographing shop windows. So I've been doing this, like I say, for 3 years. And I find it really fascinating, the narrative created in shop windows. But again, on the back of my dissertation and the conversation of blackness and whiteness, I found it fascinating in terms of what is actually being sold in shop windows beyond the actual clothes. And then it kind of come to a conclusion, whiteness is being very much promoted through the shop windows. And you can see that. And when I was in London, I photographed at night times while I was at college, and Knightsbridge and Mayfair. And I found Knightsbridge was particularly interesting because predominantly the customer base is from the Middle East or Asia, but all the mannequins, well, the mannequins didn't reflect that at all. So again, it's this kind of promotion, I sensed the promotion of whiteness to aspire to, so that obviously people would spend their money to aspire to what was being sold in the shop windows. You'll see in some work then the very few black mannequins, and Louis Vuitton in particular started using black mannequins, and they're very clear in terms of their facial features, they are black, but they actually equally were still never allowed to be black. So there's either different shades of blue or white as a mannequin, but clearly with black features. Again, that raised loads of questions that kind of there's denying of blackness there. And you can see as well equally that the shop windows and the obviously designers' influences are kind of this two-way relationship between kind of urban street culture, which feeds high-end design. And the text. So one of the things I decided to do was to obviously question this work and then started introducing text to it. And the text was research text, but then edited and abstract. So it ended up being quite abstract statements, which one obviously undermines the image to less and greater degree, but then equally leaves a question, one for the viewer to use to obviously reflect their position in relation to the work as well. Again, based on obviously my background in terms of the photographic image, I photograph these at night time for very conscious of getting kind of really good, well, a good backdrop, which was predominantly if the backdrop was limited in terms of light, so you either get black or you do get a bit of a narrative, but you get less reflections of what's going on in the shop in the daytime. So that worked really well. Also, it works well in terms of the text on the image. And the reflections, what did come in, I really like those and work with those. I think they work really well. This is, again, a whole body of work. And recently with these images, I've started animating the text. And again, I'll show you these when we go into the VR space. And I'll show you this image. So this is actually produced. So this, all the images I've shown you prior, they've been, like I say, produced over 3 years, but the work's evolved where I was initially photographing work within museums and using them with images and text. But one of the things I felt with my previous work prior to coming to the RCA is I kind of was going down a route, got myself boxed into a kind of bit of a post-colonial conversation, and I was very much wanted to come out of that and to make sure I focus on contemporary racial politics, as I've said, blackness. So there's a lot of contemporary conversations I wasn't having in the work. So then I came out of that, and like I say, with the shop windows, making sure that they are clearly very contemporary images. So now we are going to come out of this. So then we go into, this is the VR space. So let me give a big shout out to V21 Art Space, who built this project for me. So obviously all students around the world was all marching towards physical, well, art students, all marching towards a physical show. And then obviously COVID hit, and then we was presented with just the digital platform. So what I did there, then I knew my colleague Claire, who's worked for, whose business is VR 21 Art Space. So I know they go into galleries and scan exhibitions and present them as archives for the various galleries. And I know now they've been building from scratch. So I approached them to see what we could do together. I told them what I wanted. Like I say, we was presented this digital art space. We could do anything we want to lesser and greater degree. So I said, is it possible to build this space, desert, nighttime desert scene with a full wider show? And so there's a plus and minus. Obviously, I can present this whole show around my work and practice, as opposed to the physical show at college. I would have had to probably present a limited amount of work. I was never a gamer, so my joystick skills are limited, to be honest. So I show it, so you can go through this at your leisure. But you can see how the work would be possibly presented within a gallery space. Just spin it around again. And again, you can see the conversation between the posters and the suspended Christ figures. Again, a big shout out to V21 Art Space, Claire and Leif, who put in time, and Joe, who put a lot of time in this project. So you can see here, just in terms of the animation of the text, but the problem is, so these become movie files. So there's 12 of these in this actual VR space, and what they had to do, so there's a plus, they had to compress these files to get, well, there's 13 animations in this whole space. So in this space, you don't see them as necessarily the quality they are as you see in the photographic images. But you can go and enjoy that at your leisure, and just show you this obviously work on the background. So there's backed up images. Get my skills. So yeah, there we go. So again, you see the mind map again in the virtual space, and even on this, you can actually go right up close. So this is on. It's on my website plus V21's Art Space website, so you can go to either of those spaces, and then you can go close up and get all the details. So I will take, so just so you can see this base. So with building this base, so they built this nighttime desert scene, but then I wanted to include a movie, so then we had to build a bit of a black box for the movie. So I'm going to navigate in there, he says. There you go. So, so this is an animation I worked on. This was actually worked on. It's interesting. So I told you about the Christ figure. So you've got the 3D digital file. So once I've got that file, then you can do anything else you want with it. So then I decided I wanted to create this animation. So, and there's about 10, 12 of these Christ figures in this animation. And I'll give a big shout out to Maybelle Peters, who works at RCA at the time, who's just left freelancing, who worked for me with that in White City. She's put in a lot of time. Appreciate that, Mabel. So I'll start this animation again because it was compressed. So the actual quality on here is not as good as it could be. But so I'm going to come out of this once it starts. I just want to see it and then show you the better quality on QuickTime. So we go in. Right, that's stopped. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to stop it and go into the QuickTime so you can see the quality, better quality one. QuickTime, here we go. So this is the last piece of work, and then we can go into Q&A. Okay, so that's it. It's just this is the white cube. So just show you briefly. You can see what works on White Cube's website. They have got. So this is launched literally today on White Cube. Through shot figures, shot windows. The installation, but it is kind of selected in terms of figure. What's actually upsell is the bust on the plinth, the mind mappers of, like I say, proper photographic print mounted on MDF, and this suspended pink figure. and one of the animations. So there, that's, you can have obviously options to explore there. So that's it. So Susie, what do you want to do now?
Thanks so much. Do you want to stop sharing your screen and I'll just put into gallery?
Okay, cool. Yeah, great.
And yeah, we can go to a couple of questions. I've got a couple, and then we'll open it up to the audience if that's okay. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your projects and things in Nottingham. You've set up some interesting organisations.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just back to, sorry, I forgot to actually the last film to talk really what it's about. So that's the origins of my thinking around that work. Again, is about migration and people kind of crossing the Med, and clearly people losing their lives on the Med. So that's the narrative there. But in pursuit of an El Dorado, fake gold in some ways, seeing Europe as a kind of sources to riches, which clearly it does work for some, but there's a lot of people losing their life en route. So yeah, so back to Nottingham. So I'm based in Nottingham. And I will be coming back to my studio in Nottingham. So I've got a studio in Nottingham. So there's an organisation called Primary. I set that up with my colleagues. Well, we started out in 2003 as a group organisation. We kind of call ourselves Nottingham Studio, which is the business name of the organisation. And the intention always there was to set up a studio space where ultimately we wanted to own it outright and to provide security for artists. The trading name is Primary, but like I say, behind the business name is Nottingham Studio. So through a process of trying to get land, buildings, we had some options taken away all at last minute. We got offered land and that didn't happen. We did actually commission David Adjaye to do some designs for us when we got some offers, some land, but that fell away. And then in 2010/11, the Nottingham City Council offered us a Victorian school. Initially on the intention, it was a 30-year lease. So now we've got 40 odd people in the building, but it's 30-year lease, and we had the first right to buy as an organisation. That was kind of built into the contract. And right up until this year, where we did, last year we managed to get some funding from the Arts Council to purchase the building and to do some renovation work. So now, as an organisation, we do actually own the building. That completed about a month ago. So that's what I will be returning back to my studio. Obviously, it was sublet while I was doing it, the MA. I just need to clean loads of stuff out and make some space. Projects, I'm obviously going back to Nottingham. Forbes projects as an entity, I want to obviously look at exploring to deliver projects, curatorial projects, work with artists, speak to my colleagues at Primary about I'll be delivering something in the building as well. So that's what I'm working towards. I want to deliver, obviously continue and develop my own practice, but then working with other artists as well, and look at a mentoring scheme, and obviously look at funding all that. So we'll be generating conversations with possible funders. Obviously the key one is Arts Council.
Brilliant, thank you. And can you also talk a little bit about your recent projects at the Venice Biennale? And there's one at Guest Projects as well. Yeah.
So the Venice, my colleagues David A. Bailey set that up, and Jessica Taylor. So International Curators Forum. So they developed this project where there's kind of 18 months of mentoring and support, with ultimately working towards the end show in Venice, which was good. Ended up in the called Diaspora Pavilion, which is a really nice venue in Venice. Had a great time. I think I went to Venice that year 4 times, so that was great. Install, private view, friends, and then de-install. So that was a really good year. And that was interesting. So even my work, the masquerade works came out of that. But the work I presented in Venice, it was fine, but it was early stage work, and it's evolved since. And like I said earlier, that some of my conversation was around the post-colonial conversation, which there's a lot of work around post-colonial, and there's a lot of artists doing it who's doing better work than I was doing. So I'm glad I've come away from that as a main part of my conversation. Guest project, again, that was, I think Yinka Shanibar runs that space, and he puts an open calls for artists to submit proposals. So I work with Barbara Walker and Nadine Chowdhury, kind of curating a show collectively, and that worked really well. We had one-to-ones with Yinka, which is good in terms of career advice. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've had one question on the chat about what software you use to create your mind map piece, the black and white one.
It is literally, it's called MindView. And it's quite tricky, but once you kind of, like I say, it's obviously meant for office use or essay use, but then they've got these connections, and they're the ones where you can add lib, and obviously I created all the curves to make it visually engaging. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Do we have any questions on the chat or from the audience? I think everyone should be able to unmute themselves now if we have any questions. If not, I've got a few more up my
Can I
sleeve.
ask a question?
Yeah.
Just curious, really. In the majority of cases, your Christ figures are suspended upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondered what the thinking was behind that.
Well, I didn't want it. It's pulling it away from Christ on the cross,
Okay.
and in some ways, I didn't want it. It's a part metaphor for Christ, the Christ figure. So kind of in terms of this suffering figure, and then there's part, and the first one or two I did was with the painted black, as I've shown you on the A-frame. So part of it was led by the A-frame conversation. I knew I wanted it suspended and upside down, and again, part of this to deny religion. And then as I went through, you see in the VR space, that's the process where it's kind of evolved to. And the rope is kind of white. So again, this conversation about racial politics is all very subtle too. Well, degrees of it is subtle and some of it's quite blunt.
So I thought it might be actually nice just to see who's asking the question. And the thinking behind leaving the block bit, you said during the process you've got that block at the end of the torso and the end of the legs, which initially was meant to sort of, you would expect to cut that off. I'm wondering what you've sort of found pleasing about that made you want to keep it.
Well, it's good to see it. So when it came, when I got it back from the CNC process, so it's actually still got some of the grooves, the milling tool grooves in it. And then, because some of it, you have to glue those foam boards together to get one square block. And so it's got some of the glue dripping out of that. And just aesthetically, I just thought, and so in terms of obviously the Christ figure, the crucifix figure has been used in a range of artworks and obviously used in church. So then some of it's to pull it away from that as well. And aesthetically, I thought it was really interesting. And equally, it helped one with the bus on the plinth. And again, I didn't know at that moment in time when I got it back and kept it at the block on, I was going to use it just as bus, but as work evolved, it did. And the lower half with the block, the feet with the block, again, I may use that at some point on plinths on its own. Still working that one through, still thinking. And obviously, March, when I came back to Nottingham, everything shut down. I was still making those work, so it was still exploring. And then there would have been obviously a last rush up to the degree show. And then I would have probably developed more. Again, you don't know until you do it what you would have developed.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks for the question.
We've got a question on the chat about your choice of colours. You seem to use a lot of red, pink and purple. Could you talk a little bit about that choice?
Yeah, and I've used them quite a lot in previous work, even previous work from what I've shown you. And some of it was, I think, taken, and I've used them now because I am into the colours, so I can see them being used kind of in different format. But initially it was somewhere part childlike, you're going back to kind of children's toys. And I like the rich saturations of the colours. And then particularly the pink, the very candy pink, there's different pinks I've used, very light. And some of it's actually almost this counterbalance to kind of some work. If some work is like the razor wire is quite aggressive, violent material, but it ends up being a bit of a counterbalance to that in some ways. And obviously historically it's kind of been historically within my life kind of referring to kind of girly pink, but again not accepting that notion it's kind of linked to gender. And but equally I do understand it sometimes takes a bit away of the conversation around masculinity as well. So the red, again, the red is, I think I like it as a saturated colour, but it's got all its connotations to it in terms of reference to danger as well.
Brilliant. And I was wondering what's coming up next for you post MA. And
like I say, Forbes project is going to develop further. I think one of the things, obviously, spending my time in RCA in London was good. And then speaking to a number of artists, particularly Yinka, again, he was talking about having a presence in London is very important. And I can see it is important. In Nottingham, obviously, Nottingham Contemporary, Primary, and New Art Exchange as venues, but the art world en masse are not coming to Nottingham. So we've got a bit of an art ecosystem in the city in terms of Primary, but it's still, I think, in terms of I do want to be represented by a commercial gallery, and I think it's about delivering projects, particularly in London, so people can get access to it within a relative short period of time is important. I think Yinka said, he said curators in London want to be back in their office, say, within 3 hours. So if they say London-based creators want to come, it's a day out. But if put a project on in London, market it heavily, promote it, people can come and see the show and then respond that way. So that's up there as an interest. Travel more for art making. I like travel linked to art making. Traveling per se, to a degree, I go to limited places because generally over the last few years my traveling has been around art making, my practice. So art making, what influences my practice? There is actually a couple of residencies, one in Senegal, Black Rock. I wouldn't mind applying to that next year or when it opens up again. And actually Yinka will be doing starting a venue and residency in Nigeria. Again, I'd like to apply for that. Obviously there's no guarantee to get selected, but I would choose residencies what suit my work and practice. So you see a range of residency advertised, but sometimes I just think, well, that doesn't fit my conversation, so I won't necessarily apply for them.
And can you talk a little bit about your curatorial projects as well?
Yeah, over the years I've developed a number of exhibitions. I used to work for it's an organisation, Old Art Exchange. There's an organisation in that in 2010, probably. I can't remember the exact dates. So I got a job as kind of a curator for that organisation, and then they got resources to develop the whole building. So it demolished the old building it was in and built the New Art Exchange. And I was kind of curating programs leading up to the launch and then their first year in existence. And then I wanted to, again, return back to my practice. And I have developed a number of independent ones, but one of this danger, and I've done it with kind of a few things, is that if you're chasing two, it's like chasing two hares. Do you get any? So I think as an artist, there's a danger chasing two things, then your own practice drops back. And I'm conscious of that now, but I think now my practice has moved on a bit. I don't think I would let, obviously, curatorial projects take over the practice. So I do plan to develop some, but again, it will be that fine balance between my own practice. And plus I want to employ people. So Forbes projects, if we work towards a grant application, it will be about employing people, and that's other curators, administrations and marketing people to help. Again, it's to make things go further and do more. And I want to look at the ongoing, I'm in the process now of developing a proposal looking at contemporary sculpture. And again, on the back of some of the conversations at RCA and pedagogy linked to contemporary sculpture, I'm still working on that proposal now.
Brilliant, thank you. Do we have any last questions on the chat or from anyone in the audience? Okay, brilliant. If everyone could just unmute themselves, and we'll just give Michael a really big round of applause and just say thank you so much for speaking to us today. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Well, thank you for the invite, Susie. I really appreciate it.